This morning, we heard Shira, the Song of the Sea in Bishalach, and the story of Deborah from the book of Judges. Ora not only beautifully chanted the text, she also artfully articulated highlights from today's Sedra and Haftarah, which, I will note, is the longest of the year. So when I began to think about what I was going to say today, I'm going to admit I felt really overwhelmed. The narratives offer action-packed military victories, detailed first in prose and then again in poetic form. God is portrayed as warrior. Deborah issues decrees from under a tree. Barak maintains he will not go to war without her. Yael uses a tent stake to do her part for the cause. Miriam, who is called by name for the first time, dances at the shore of the sea. So many traces. I had no idea where to begin. And it's not so often that there's just too much to say about a Torah portion. So I asked Faith, what do you think I should talk about? And she gave me some good ideas. She suggested, talk about the fact that, other than the 10 Commandments, why we stand, and we can talk about privilege and all these different things. And then I asked Ben, what should I talk about? And he's like, go check out what Kelley has to say, the commentary from the 16th century Torah scholar. And then I listened to Ora when she was practicing her Devar Torah, and I was thinking, I'm going to get some insight. And I have to be honest, I felt very moved and very intrigued by what you had to say. But I still struggled. So basically what I've done for the last week is walk around my house with Debbie Friedman's song in my head, a little Miriam song, a little Devorah song, just playing over and over again, which was lovely, but it didn't offer me an inspiration, and it didn't give me any clear thoughts on what to say. So I finally did what rabbis do. You take a step back, you work on getting some perspective, and you think about, why am I stuck? What is it about this piece of Torah that is not sitting right with me? When I did that, I began to realize that I was chafing against the use of female characters in the story, this ubiquitous custom that we have of drawing attention to the prominent role of women in this particular piece of text. So today's readings have been used to further the cause of the inclusion of women in all aspects of life, professional, national, political, religious. In 1873, social activist and author Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote a book detailing exactly how strong female leaders remain consistent with biblical values. In this book, Women in Sacred History, she writes, as the song dies away, so passes all mention of Deborah. No other fragment of poetry or song from her has come down from her age to us. This one song, like a rare fragment of some deep-sea flower, broken off by a storm of waters, has floated up to tell of her. We shall see as we follow down the line of history that women of this lofty poetic inspiration were the natural product of the Jewish laws and institutions. They grew out of them as certain flowers grow out of certain soils. A century ago, suffragists maintained that women should have the right to vote, citing that God saw fit to appoint Deborah to be a judge in Israel. In 1948, when Israel became a state, the Sephardi chief rabbi employed the example of Deborah to uphold his argument for the women's right to vote and hold office. And over the years and across our country, synagogues have used this week's Torah portion to acknowledge Women's League, or for Sisterhood Shabbat, or to draw attention to the unique contributions that women make to Jewish communal life. So what has me vexed is the phenomena of employing one of these very few places in Torah that focuses on the roles and achievements of women in the past to honor women today. You're right. There is nothing inherently wrong with this practice. But today, it doesn't feel only overdone, it feels disingenuous. Why? Why should the inclusion of women let alone those in leadership positions, even be noteworthy. We don't see Brotherhood Shabbat dedicated to Noah's construction skills or Abraham's almost sacrifice of his son. Men's clubs around the world are not gathering to celebrate when Moses takes out the Egyptian taskmaster. It is frustrating. I yearn for a time when the role of women in pivotal moments of history is so commonplace, so mundane, it's pretty much taken for granted. Now, my irritation came as a surprise even to me. I believed that I had come to terms with the historical gender imbalance in our sacred text years ago. I thought that as a woman rabbi, I had found a way where I could revel in the roles of Miriam and Sarah, where I could celebrate Deborah and Yael, where I can honor Huldah and Rahab, all without simultaneously justifying their diminished roles in our text. My friends, I was wrong. I realized that I needed a way to hold on to the veracity of my people's treasured stories in this day, in our new 2021 world. How do you reconcile a book that so often overlooks women's voices with this time and place, when both men and women waited for hours to pay their final respects to a Supreme Court justice who was a warrior for women's rights, where girls and young women have taken to wearing pearls and chucks just to pay homage to our country's first female vice president? Clearly, the Torah and I needed another reckoning. Ironically, I found my path toward reconciliation on social media. I know. So I've been following this controversy. I don't know if anybody else has been, probably not, but following this controversy surrounding Disney's new animated movie. It's called Raya and the Last Dragon. I know. There always seems to be this flurry and swirl of emotions and questions when every time Disney releases a new movie. But this one comes out in March, tells the story of a kind young warrior princess and, dragons. So predictably, Raya hails from a fictional land. But this one is based on Southeast Asian culture. So the issue that's got, Facebook all up in arms is that the cast is predominantly East Asian. For the sake of today's discussion, that's another topic, we're going to put politics and geography aside, because I want to talk about representation. Disney has been making full-length animated movies since 1937. But the first time you had a character with ethnic origin wasn't until Aladdin in 1992. I'd ask Faith to do the math, but that is not her strong suit. Since then, Disney has released some films with diversity: Pocahontas, Mulan, Moana, Princess and the Frog. They each featured a different culture, but I gotta be honest, varying degrees of success. So 3 years ago, the US Census Bureau estimated that nearly 40% of our country's population was not white. The best guess is by 2055, our nation will not have a racial or ethnic majority. And yet, only about 20% of lead film actors are people of color. It's slow going, but Disney and Hollywood are catching on a bit. We've had some help with the hashtag #OscarsSoWhite. And there are some people who remain cynical because they point out that diversity itself comes with economic advantages. But watchdog groups do see an improvement in overall diversity. Why is it so important? Because, as you all know, as you sit in front of a screen right now, that we consume a mind-boggling amount of media every day. Those pandemics have only increased those numbers. There are some estimates that claim that global online content doubled in 2020. So the numbers vary, but organizations that measure such things as this place us as watching between 2 and 4 hours of television a day. That doesn't even count the 7 hours we spend on our phones. All of this online time impacts and shapes how we see the world. The content on the screen may be fictional, but what is true is how it shapes our view of reality. And that means that change cannot come soon enough. The negative effects on self-esteem and mental health of not seeing aspects of oneself depicted in popular media are well known and far-reaching. Kelley Marie Tran, the voice of the princess in Raya and the Last Dragon, is an American of Southeast Asian descent, and she recently wrote, "I want to live in a world where children of color don't spend their entire adolescence wishing to be white. You might know me as Kelley. I am the first woman of color to have a leading role in a Star Wars movie. I am the first Asian woman to appear on the cover of Vanity Fair. My real name is Loan, and I am just getting started." We also rely on media to formulate opinions about the unknown, meaning that not only quantity, but quality of representation is pivotal. When Hollywood relies on stereotypes, people do too. Negative portrayals can aggravate racial tensions and diminish how people of color see themselves. Prolonged television exposure has been shown to lead to a decrease in self-esteem for all girls and for Black boys, and an increase in self-esteem for white boys. We simply have to get past casting people of color only as the quirky sidekick or the immoral villain. Today, we're hearing stories of children, Muslim children who 5 years ago were literally afraid that they would be forced to leave America. And now they're looking at Vice President Harris and thinking that they could be president one day. Representation matters. Media is an undeniable and strong presence in our everyday lives, impacting how we think of others and how we view ourselves. Representation wields an enormous amount of power, and it needs to be handled carefully. So holding this understanding about the multifaceted role which representation plays in forming and sustaining our worldview, I returned to Bishalach and went back to the book of Judges. It's far from perfect, but I'm learning to see past my concerns and focus on the positive aspects of representing women in leadership roles in the Torah. So I've made some choices. I am going to view Yael as our people's version of Gal Gadot in Wonder Woman. What am I do? When I read about Deborah and Barak, I'm going to take it as the Jewish version of Crazy Rich Asians. I'm going to treat Miriam as the basis for Shiri, sister to T'Challa in the Black Panther. The treatment of women in our sacred text needs to be looked at. It needs to be discussed. It is far from perfect. Their stories have been appropriated and misappropriated over the years. But I've decided, just for now, to be thrilled to see them there in any case. Shabbat Shalom.